Newsroom. France's president this Thursday expressing heartfelt emotion after the suicide of a 42-year-old man whose unemployment benefits had run out. The Algerian immigrant setting himself on fire Wednesday outside a dole office in the western city of Nantes. France's growing army of unemployed, more than 10% of the workforce, with new recruits from industry, most notably the automobile sector. Now, while the French president, flanked by an armada of business leaders, visits Delhi to court contracts in India, back home comes bad news of negative growth in the last quarter of 2012, the recession worsening throughout the Eurozone, which brings up several key questions. How do you avoid a lost decade of anemic growth? How do you kickstart an economy when money is tight? Today in the France 24 debate, we chart France's road to growth. With us, Valérie Rabault, member of the French Parliament from the ruling Socialists. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Last year, he stirred a bit of buzz with his cheeky Barrez-vous manifesto, inciting harried French entrepreneurs to move abroad.
Not just entrepreneurs.
Not just entrepreneurs. Who else?
Just the youth in general.
The youth in general. But we're glad to see that Félix Marquardt is with us in Paris. He's with the international relations consultancy Marquardt and Marquardt, and a man who can find silver linings in any spreadsheet. Mark Dean of the Bloomberg News Agency. Welcome, sir. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. France has indeed fallen flat. No growth for the fiscal year 2012. The economy contracting 0.3% in the final quarter of the year. Bank of France does predict an uptick for this current quarter, but don't expect miracles. Even Germany's economy contracted as the Eurozone recession stiffened, its biggest plummet since the failure of Lehman Brothers and the start of the financial crisis back in 2008. Mark Dean, what is the medium-term outlook for France at this point?
The medium term, I mean, the next couple of years are going to be difficult. There's, really the lack of growth that we've had in the past year, because the French economy hasn't posted anything more than a quarter of 0.1% growth in more than a year. I think it's going back to early 2011 when we saw any sort of real growth, is really the result of decades of neglect. These things don't happen overnight generally, and they don't turn around overnight. So the next couple of years are tough. Deficit cutting, hopefully structural reform, and
are we headed towards something like the Japanese saw, where there was one decade of just sort of what they called a lost decade?
I hope not. I mean, it is one of the theses, but that if that's the case, it will be larger than just France. I mean, I think that tonight we're talking about France and what France can do to get out ahead of that, and I think there are solutions on the table. But whether we actually get through and make them happen is another question.
Valérie Rabault?
I share the view that you just expressed, that it does not happen in one night, and it will not be recovered in one night for sure. This is consequences of lack of investment for past few years, I would say. And this is also the consequences of what is happening to Europe. When we are looking at the figures published this morning or yesterday by Eurostat, it's true that for Germany it was minus 0.6 for the last quarter in 2012. So even...
They're falling from a higher perch.
Yes, I agree with you. But even Germany, that is presented like a strong economy, has suffered minus 0.6 as a growth in the last quarter.
You say lack of investment the past few years in France.
Yes.
Lack of investment on the part of whom? The private sector, the government?
Both. Until 1995, roughly, public investment have been lowered, and they have not been replaced by private investment. So there is a lack, at the end of the day, for the French economy, there is a lack of investment. And now we are suffering today the consequences of this. We see what is happening on the automobile sector. This is exactly that we need to build the new product for tomorrow, but we can't wait. This is, for today, it's a little bit late. So we need to invest for the futures, but we need to find solutions for today. And the solution for today is that we need to maintain the consumption, because this is one of the key drivers for the French growth.
We'll get back to that issue of consumption of consumer spending. But let me just ask you, Felix Marquardt. Of course, if you want to kickstart an economy, you have to spend some money, but the coffers are empty.
Well, the state's coffers are empty. The fact is that in an article that was published, I think yesterday or today, by Éric Leboucher on Slate, the private sector's coffers are far from being empty. There's €250 billion that's sitting unused these days for various reasons. And it's up to the state, and it's up to not just the French state, because we've been talking about French problems. These are not just French problems, and the solutions to these problems are certainly not only French. And what we need is to find, not just in France, but throughout Europe, initiatives that encourage companies, that stimulate investment from these companies into new technologies,
What's your gut
innovation.
feeling? Why is it that they're not investing right now in France?
Well, first of all, because they're checked on, not just in France, but elsewhere. They are led to keep safe, for rating agencies that are on their backs, for many other reasons. There are incentives that are not pushed forward enough, like forcefully enough by states to get them to spend this money and to make these investments.
Getting the private sector to spend the money it's got, is that the government's job?
It's part of it. I agree with you. There are billions of euros or dollars, call it like you want, in cash in some companies. And some of them are waiting to see. It's a wait-and-see attitude. And wait-and-see is not good for economy, for sure.
Certainly not these days.
Wait and see, but it's been 5 years since the start of the crisis, Mark.
Well, I mean, these things are complicated. 5 years ago, in 2008, Lehman Brothers blew up and the world went into recession, and France came out of that relatively well, actually. The growth didn't collapse. It's really just in the past year and a half that we've seen French growth grind to a halt, and that's really because of as I was saying, longer term problems. And what we're seeing in the INSEE numbers released today, the quarter, there was actually a drop in investment, and that's sort of typical. Is what we're talking about here is this sort of hesitation as to where the economy is going and what sort of prospects there are when you don't see any growth on the horizon. You're not going to want to invest. And to be fair, that's also partly where France is at relative to other countries right now. The fiscal consolidation, the budget cutting is coming a little bit later, and it's the tough time is now.
And the budget cutting, does it have to continue because France is got its Eurozone partners, and it's promised it's going to try to meet, although it won't this year, that it's 3%.
Look, everyone agrees, including everyone just about in Hollande's government, that the deficit needs to be reduced, and there's no going back on that. That said, you can discuss about the timing of it and the speed of it, and there's a hump to get over, and that hump is in front of us right now.
And we shouldn't be too obsessive about that figure right now. It's very obvious.
All right, because Michael on Facebook, Michael from Brampton, Ontario, is saying, there is a saying to us, by ending the austerity myth and turning to more sound economic policy is how you get out of it. Austerity-driven growth is impossible. The only appropriate time for austerity is during economic prosperity. So Valérie Rabault, it's interesting to hear, and I listened to the finance minister this morning, the prime minister last night.
I agree with Michael, but is minus 3% austerity or not? I don't think so. Reaching minus 3% is not austerity.
3% of GDP in your budget deficit.
In the budget as the budget deficit. It's not austerity. It's needed to avoid you paying some billion of euros, 50 billion of euros each year as interest. this is just to be able to drive the economy, but it's not austerity to have the -3%.
Also,
I'm sorry.
Also, I think like we should stop focusing on whether it's about spending more, spending less. As if that were the only question, and as if the 3.5% figure was the beginning and end of everything. It's not. There's issues in France. There's problems in France that date way back from way before the crisis. Those issues pertain to flexibility of the job market. They pertain to the fact that we have a series of different contracts that one can be governed by.
But you're basically unfireable if you get a full-time contract.
And those are the ins. Those are the jobs that everyone is seeking for. That is one of the reasons, certainly, why French youths have made their primary ambition to covet a government job and to become public servants.
Is that still the case?
That is still the case. That's still the case in France. The number one aspiration of French youths is to become a civil servant.
No.
And unfortunately, what's sad about that is that they're not aspiring. This is not the sum of people who want to become cops and teachers and diplomats and health professionals. I just wish. No, these are people who, they don't care about which job. They don't care about whether it's being a postman or whether it's working for the health industry or whether it's being a cop. It's about having that specific contract that you get as a public servant, which basically guarantees you a job for life. And I think that the simple fact that French youth are so obnubilated by that fact shows what is wrong with the system. When you're 20 or 25, you should not be constantly obsessed about inserting yourself, as the term is used in France. You should be trying to you should have dreams and trying to build extraordinary things. And the French youths are not dreaming about extraordinary things. They are not. They're dreaming about finding a way to miserably find a place in what is looking to them as a shitty system.
I don't agree with you. I will send you a few surveys that probably are different from yours, showing it's.
But what do people tell you in your home constituency in the southwest of France?
I will tell you, but I will just answer Felix first, if I may. It's just that there is a Eurobarometer has published a survey regarding entrepreneurship within Europe, and you can draw some comparison between the French, the German, etc., the Italian, etc. When you see the spirit of entrepreneurship, it's shared in France also. It's not like the way you present it. Sorry.
But is that not true? That most French youths aspire to get government jobs?
No,
that's not true.
I will invite you in Montauban, in Tarn-et-Garonne. I'm sure you will meet a few young people and you will ask them and you will see the answer.
Okay, but I'm sure I can meet people who want to be entrepreneurs. I'm asking you the simple question. Is the number one aspiration of French youths not to become a civil servant?
There is the issue of job security, and we saw it this week with Goodyear confirming the closing of a plant. Carmaker Peugeot announcing 5 billion euros of losses. It's already announced the shutting of a factory north of Paris. Each time it's a trauma for the people who are fired, and it seems as though much more so in a way, you might argue, Mark Dean, than in an Anglo-Saxon country. Here, there's the sense that a job is for life, even in the private sector.
Fundamentally, I think people are more realistic than that. However, when you get a plant closing in a place like Amiens or Florange or wherever, your heart does go out to these people because there isn't going to be the next steel plant next door or whatever that's just going to provide another job like the ones that are going to be there. The problem is in the national discussion, we talk about trying to save those jobs in a way that isn't really realistic, and that tire plant or the steel plant is really very difficult to save, and it's wrong for the government of all stripes to make people think that they can be saved and that, industries which flourished half a century ago are what the government should be investing in for the future.
And that's what has been the case. This is where I feel politicians in France and in many other countries of all sides have really been, have proven, just unhelpful for their constituents. They have basically not been able to tell the truth. There's a whole bunch of jobs that will not be in Europe in the future. Then we should spend more time about thinking about creating new industries. Rather than keeping them alive another 10 or 20 years.
Let's listen to the reactions at Peugeot, which announced those losses and is trying to roll with the punches, making new hybrid cars, but for the time being, really feeling the pinch after that record loss.
Our financial security is reinforced compared to last year, thanks to all the efforts that were made in 2012. What's more, I can confirm that we will be in a more balanced situation in 2014.
The money hasn't left the group. It's not a loss of money. The employer is just deciding that a given factory is worth less than it used to be. All in all, the situation is not that catastrophic. They're just using the announcement to shock public opinion.
Not that catastrophic. Valérie Rabault, what's your thought on that?
It's true that part of the losses, the 5 billion, are coming from depreciation, 4.9 billion euros. So
write-downs.
Yes, write-down. Yes, write-down. So I'm not. I did not have a look into details on the minus 4.9 billion euros, but for sure it's that. When I was expressing before that we need to be innovative, to invest, with maybe not been enough the case for Peugeot. There has been a report in July, Sartorius, which is independent, explaining the way investments were missing in some of the new products for Peugeot. And I think this is the main cases.
And we're made too much in Europe and not enough elsewhere, not in growth markets. That's why Renault is today being presented as faring slightly less poorly.
We need to invest where you have your market. I agree with you on that. It's the demand is driving the investment.
All right, and for the green shoots of the economy to sprout, you need help for small businesses. It's something that we'll talk about when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.